So what are we going to cover today? We're going to look at the new platform, right? We are going to look at the tools, the new version of the OS, which is called the WinRT or WinPRT as it's for Windows Phone. We look at the new features that have been introduced in the new platform, the new hardware we have, and then how we can leverage our investment in 7.5 that we have made going into Windows Phone 8. So with Windows Phone 8, now you have a huge array of hardware. We have devices from Nokia, we have devices from HTC, we have devices from Samsung, and there are a lot of other vendors who are coming on board, right? The HTC and Nokia devices are in the market as of today. So you can go and buy from HTC the HTC devices, and from Mobile and Nokia the Nokia devices. So what's new in Windows Phone 8? It's a new platform, it's a new hardware, right? We support an increased 1 GB RAM, we support a new graphics card, a new processor, right? So that brings a lot of performance improvement into the Windows Phone environment. We also support removable storage now with Windows Phone 8. So you can bring your applications, your data onto a micro SD card, and you can use it with your phones. Now, it all depends upon the hardware manufacturer if he is going to support this capability or not. So you'll have various devices that do support this capability and some that don't. So, can somebody tell me what was the operating system in Windows 7.5? No, what was the base OS? Mango and Tango were the code names for Windows Phone. But what was the core OS? The Windows OS? Windows CE. So what we had here was Windows CE. Moving into Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8, we have something called the Windows Runtime, right? And that kernel is now shared between the Windows Phone and Windows 8. Now, why is that important? Because now Windows Phone can leverage the same hardware capabilities as Windows 8. Device driver manufacturers or device manufacturers can leverage the same APIs, same hardware, same drivers across the different devices. In terms of application development, it will become much easier for us to port applications from Windows 8 to Windows Phone and back and forth. So what does that mean and what does that not mean? So in terms of capabilities, I already told you, it's the same kernel. Device drivers are same across the two platforms. What it doesn't mean that you're not going to have the same parity between Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8. There are going to be differences in the WinRT, right? Because there may be features, and we look in the coming slides, there are going to be features which are specific to Windows Phone, right? And there are going to be capabilities which are specific to Windows 8. Now, in terms of programming, if you are a C# or VB developer, you're very familiar with the .NET environment, you can leverage that expertise in the Windows Phone environment. So 7.5 was predominantly .NET Core, C# and VB, and that still applies with Windows Phone 8. So if you see here, you have the .NET APIs, and you can leverage those .NET APIs in managed code. We have something new called the Windows Phone Runtime, and that is the kernel which I was talking about, which is shared with Windows 8. And then you have pure Win32 and COM. So in terms of application development, there's something wrong with the mic. It keeps disconnecting. Excuse me. This keeps disconnecting. So in terms of application development, you can leverage your C#, VB, and XNA skills on the .NET APIs. You can also use it across the Windows Phone 8 environment. So you can use .NET APIs on Windows Phone 8. And then, if you want to do programming in pure C++, so for example, you have heavy processing of images, some complex memory-intensive task, you want to make it very performant, you can develop that in C++ and bring it into the environment also. We also support 3D, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. So Windows Phone 8, as I mentioned, supports the .NET API, and you can leverage that in the programming both for Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8. We have added a lot of new APIs for the Windows Phone 8, like the wallet, the share media, the maps, etc. In addition to that, we have the Windows Phone Runtime, and there are APIs which sort of correlate with the .NET APIs. Now, if you are developing for 7.1, 7.5 release, and you want to also maintain a binary for 8.0, then probably you're going to use the .NET APIs. But you're thinking of building for the Windows Phone 8 and the Windows 8, then you'd probably land up running with the Windows Phone Runtime, because that is more compatible, right? Now, the full WinRT has about 11,000 members, out of which only about 2,800 are used in the Windows Phone environment, because many of them don't make sense on the phone, right? And then for the phone specifically, we have added about 600 more APIs. And if you look at the previous slide, right, the APIs start with the Microsoft namespace. So these are the .NET APIs. The WinRT run APIs start with the Windows namespace, right? But if you see here, you have the same kind of capability between the WinRT and the .NET API. And then, as I mentioned, if you wanted to use the .NET API, you would use some of the system namespaces or the Microsoft namespaces, and then you have the analogous Windows Phone Runtime APIs, which are starting with the Windows namespace. And you can choose whichever API you like, they are the same. And then you have COM32, Win32 COM APIs. These are low-level APIs that allow you very low-level access to the hardware. So for example, you have WinSock, camera, COM APIs that you can leverage in Win32. So let's talk about the app models, right? With Windows Phone 7.5, we had XAML, C#, and VB. And that paradigm continues with Windows Phone 8. So even with Windows Phone 8, you can leverage the same skill set. You can use XAML, C# or VB, and then you can write in either managed code, which is the .NET APIs, or then you can use the Windows Phone Runtime. What I would like to do is cover some of the slides and then do the demos all together, if that's okay with you, right? Then we have support for XNA Games, and this was the only model available at 7.5. You had only XNA. Now, XNA, you do not have a UI, right? So you cannot design your UI in C# or, in XAML. But what you could do is, you could have the UI in XNA, but you could have the code behind as C#. And what that gives you is the capability to have the power of XAML, right? Because a lot of controls that you develop in XAML are much easier than doing that in XNA. So you could have, for example, if you want to design a letterboard, you can do that easily with Silverlight or XAML, right? Doing that in XNA is much, much tougher. So that's why we have these templates. And the same templates continue with Windows Phone 8. Now we have Direct3D support, right? And you have a template by itself for the Direct3D. This gives you access to the Direct3D engine. You can develop high-performance games. And this allows you to leverage some of the engines that are there in Windows 8 and bring them down to Windows Phone 8. Okay? So you can have applications that are running on Windows 8 as well as Windows Phone 8. And then you can mix and match. So you can have Direct3D as well as XAML like you had in XNA and XAML also. What you can also do, as I mentioned earlier, is have a XAML project but you could have some of your libraries sitting in C++. And we'll see a demo of that, where you can have your processing, your memory-intensive, performance-intensive task written in C#, C++, and used with XAML or VB.NET. Now, Windows Phone 8 does not support the HTML5 JavaScript kind of development as we do in Windows Phone 8. Right? But we do support HTML5 on the platform. We have the IE10 browser on the phone, and we have a project template that allows you to build HTML5 applications. But these are browser applications. These are not the Windows Phone 8 kind of applications that you see in Windows 8. Right? So as I said, you have a template that allows you to create an HTML5 project. It gives you a browser control that you can leverage to bring in your HTML5 content. So let me stop here, okay? Let me go through the demos and then we'll continue. So I'm going to start with Visual Studio. So let's create a new project. And if you see here, you have various types of templates. You have the Windows Phone app, you have the phone data bound, and we'll see some of these as we go along. But let me click on the phone app. Click OK. It asks me whether I want to create a Windows Phone 8 application or a 7.1 application. Now, the 7.1 OS correlates with the 7.5 release of Windows Phone. So you have both the templates available. You can choose Windows Phone 8. And keep in mind, the 7.5 applications continue to run on Windows 8. And we will see that in the coming slides. We'll talk about that more. So here I have a template, right? And this is the XAML representation of the UI. So I have a text block here, I have a text block here, and I have a grid here. And we'll talk about these controls more in detail in the next sections. But keep in mind that I have a UI, right, that's generated in XAML. And then I have a UI, or I have a code behind which allows me to manage the UI in either C# or VB.NET. So if you come back to the projects, say new project, I have C#, I have Visual Basic, which again gives me the Windows Phone applications. And then I can come to C++, and even here I'll have the Windows Phone. And in here, if you see, I can create the directory, I can create the runtime components for Windows Phone. I can also come in here and say new project. So let me just run this. And this is going to kick off the emulator. Now this is a whole Windows Phone OS that's being rendered into a virtual machine, right? So it takes a bit of time when it spins off for the first time. So if you are developing, I would suggest keep it running and don't switch off the emulator again and again. You can switch off the project. Excuse me. This is not working. It keeps disconnecting. Can you change this for me? Change this one. It keeps disconnecting. Either the battery is low. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. So what you have here is the emulator, and I'm going to talk about the emulator in more detail. There are a lot of options available in the emulator that you can use while building applications, especially with debugging, etc. So this is a complete application running in C# and XAML. So if I switch this off, I can create a new project template, and this time I can take the HTML5 template, click OK. So if you see here now, on the left-hand side, I have a web browser control, right? So I have a web browser control that allows me to bring in HTML content, right? So you can have my HTML mobile applications running on the Windows Phone, sitting inside the browser, and I can have C# or VB as managed code, right? And then we have the XAML and XNA project. So if you see here, I have a XAML screen, right, which allows me to gather information from the user. For example, if I want a registration screen, or I want a letterboard, or I want to display the results, I can do it much better in XAML than in XNA. So I can match the power of XAML and XNA to build high quality phone games. So if I run this here, you get into the XAML, I click on this, and then this is the actual XNA game that would be rendered. And if I look at the code again, so I have this main page that is rendering the UI, and in here I open the game page.xaml. Which is basically using XNA to generate the screen. Okay? We won't get into details of these, but just to have an idea of what the capabilities of the platform are. And then similarly, we can have direct 3D. So if I come here, I can go to other languages, C++. So I can create a 3D project with C++. So if you are a game developer, you can use the power of Direct 3D and design your application and your games in Direct 3D on the Windows Phone. And if you look at the performance, it's still an emulator, but the rendering is very good. It'll be much better when you are actually running it on the phone. While we are here, so I have this project which has its UI in XAML, right? But I also have a library which is in C++. And this does the photo processing for me. So I'm going to pick a large image, right, and convert it into grayscale and display it on the phone. So if I see here, I have this image, right? I'm going to take this and I'm going to convert it into grayscale and display it on the phone. So if you see here below, it's compiling the C++. As I said, it takes a while to load up the first time. So I have this image. Interesting. So this should convert it into grayscale. Something is wrong here. I'll come back to this later on. But come again? Yeah, I'll just switch this on. Just give me a second. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. So if you look at the code behind for this application, we had a go clicked event, right, which then calls a method called create grayscale native, right, and that sits in our C++ application. Which basically converts the image into grayscale using C++ and sends it back to our managed code. Okay? So this is how you can leverage the power of C++ to create libraries which are high performant, use the C++ binaries to do a lot of processing, image processing, things like that, math computations, and send them back to your managed applications. So let's get back to the slides. So those of you who have built for Windows 7.5 will see that we have a new portal now, right? It used to be create.msdn.com. Now we are at dev.windowsphone.com. And this provides you resources both for the 7.5 platform as well as the 8.0. And you have the SDKs, the tutorials, the learning resources all available in one place. And this is what the Dev Center looks like. You have a lot of resources. So go in, there's a lot of samples continuously being updated, which help you learn the platform. So what does it take to start building Windows Phone 8 applications? Number one is the right hardware. So for building Windows Phone 8 applications, you need Windows 8. Right? Because it requires the same WinRT. Then you need to have the right hardware. So the recommendation is at least 4 GB of RAM. My recommendation would be at least 8 because sometimes you need memory intensive applications. And then you need a 64-bit motherboard. Right? You also need Windows Pro or higher, because we are going to be running the emulator on Windows 8. And then you need a SLAT-enabled hardware. Now, the way you check your hardware, if it's SLAT compatible or not, you can download this tool from the TechNet website, run it, it's called Core Info, and then it's going to give you a report indicating whether you have SLAT enabled on your hardware or not. So if you see this star next to EPT, that means you're good to go. If you see a negative, then you should start looking for a new hardware. In order to develop for Windows Phone, the SDK is free. You really don't need anything much. But then to deploy it, to test your applications on the device, you will have to unlock the device. So the Windows phones are developer locked. You cannot deploy applications onto the phone. In order to deploy the application and test the application on the device, you need to unlock it. And the way you would do that is go to the Dev Center and register for a developer account. Right? Now, if you are a MSDN subscriber, it is included as part of your MSDN subscription. So the Windows Phone 8 and the Windows 8 subscriptions are available to MSDN subscribers. If you are a student, it's included with your DreamSpark subscription. If you are a professional developer, then you need to pay about 375 reals to get the developer account. So what's new in Windows Phone 8? Most importantly, we have made a lot of investment in the UI. Previously, developers had only one tile to work with, right? Now we have given you the same capabilities as the native applications. So you have 3 different sizes of tiles. You have the small, the medium, square, and the rectangular. We have introduced new templates, and we will talk about that later in the tile section, which allow you to provide rich content to the live tiles. That's one of the greatest capabilities of Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8 is the desktop is live. No 2 desktops are going to be the same. No 2 phones are going to be the same. It's personalized content. It brings information to you on your screen, makes it very lively, keeps information coming from applications even while the applications are not running. We have introduced the lock screen. So those of you who have seen 7.5 and use 7.5 know that we did not have much capability on the lock screen, right? We could change the background, but in terms of content, we had the calendar, then we had missed call notification, SMS, and mail. Now with the new lock screen, I can choose the image provider. So I can choose which application is going to provide me the background images. So you have Bing, you have Facebook, you have your Photos application, and even your own applications that you build can be providers to the lock screen background. Then you choose the application that is going to provide content. So if you see here, you choose the application that's going to provide the content. And then you have up to 5 applications that you can add to your lock screen. Applications that you choose are going to be important for you to be notified. So it could be Skype, it could be voice, it could be SMS. You choose what applications you want there. We have new launchers, right? So we have capabilities for media, maps. We have a new map API that uses the Nokia's technology for mapping. So this is the new maps control, right? It's much faster, provides much faster rendering, provides more capabilities, and especially in terms of local content. The Nokia maps have better local content for the region. And you have different types of layouts. So for example, you have road, aerial, hybrid, and terrain. We also have new location APIs for the phone runtime. You could even use the previous APIs if you want, but then those have been depreciated. You should start looking at the new APIs. Also, the location tracking, you have applications that can run in the background, right? So you can have continuous tracking of geolocation. So for example, if you want to build an application that monitors the movement as you go along, you want to map the route when you're moving, or you want to have the GPS run while you are doing some other application, or you receive a phone call, the GPS application is going to continuously run in the background. We've added speech support to the Windows Phone, right? And these are some of the APIs that are only on the phone. They are not on Windows 8, right? So these are the new additions to the Windows Phone platform. And they are categorized as 2. You have voice commands, and then you have speech recognition and text-to-speech. So you can add voice capability to your application. So you can provide commands to your application, which it will recognize and then activate. You can even have speech recognition and text-to-speech. So for example, you can have your application read out text to the user. Then we have something called the wallet. The wallet allows you capabilities to electronically store your payment information, your coupons, your credit card information, and make transactions using NFC or tap to pay. So for example, over here we have applications like the American Airlines, the Chase card, and these applications understand the wallet, and you can integrate that into your application. So for example, if I'm going to the airline counter, rather than giving them my frequent flyer card, I could just tap it to their device, and the information would be passed on to that device. I do not have to physically carry those cards anymore. Then I can have deals, coupons, as I mentioned, tracked in my wallet. We have new UI controls and a lot of improvement in the way we did the controls. So for example, the list control has been depreciated. Instead of the list, you will see the long list selector. It's much more performant, provides you a lot of new capabilities, and most importantly, it has been put into the ROM, so you have better performance. It's there in the phone itself. You don't have to download it separately. So for example, you have flat lists, you have group lists, you have the jump list. If you see here, this is the jump list, which allows you to jump to any category of names or whatever. This used to be in the Silverlight toolkit. We have removed it and put it as part of the core tools, and we have put it in the ROM. Even the pivot and panorama control, how many of you who have used 7.5 have used the pivot and panorama control? It used to be a bit sluggish, right? Especially if you are doing a lot of things, it used to be a bit sluggish. Now it is there in the ROM, so it's very performant. And then, as I said, you have the web browser control that is IE10. So you can bring the same hardware acceleration to your web applications, the CSS3 and HTML5 capabilities to the phone. We support different screen resolutions. So you start with WVGA, you can go to WXGA, and then you have 720, which is 1280 by 720 resolution. So we support different screen resolutions. As a developer, right, we take care of the screen sizes for you, but you still need to test your application on the different resolutions. We've added a lot of support for cameras and photos. We have new lenses. How many of you have seen at least demos of the new Nokia lenses? Anybody? No? You have? So it's a new experience altogether. And we have the Nokia devices. I suggest you have a look at it. So you can use the same technology in your own applications. You can even use the photo application. So for example, if you want to extend the Photos hub, or you want to use the app picker for the photos and integrate it into the photo application, you can do that now. You also have the background photo upload, and this is something very nice. I had a scenario where I had clicked some photos of the event that we did in Jeddah on my phone, and then people were playing around with it, and the password got messed up. And eventually, I landed up formatting the hardware, and I was scared that I had lost all those photos. But what the phone had done was, at the background, took those photos and put it onto my SkyDrive, right? So it's a very great capability, and you can use that in your own applications. And then we have advanced camera capture APIs. So for example, if you want in your application to set the ISO, have low-level capture capabilities for your camera, you can do that with the APIs that we provide. Similarly, we will not go into details. You have more capabilities on the music, the pictures library, and the background audio. Some key capabilities are for VoIP and video chat. Now we give you the capability of VoIP as a native application. So the applications that you build will have the same experience as the phone application on the Windows Phone. What that means is, so for example, you have a Skype call coming in, right? It is going to have the same kind of UI that your Windows Phone has. So if you have a voice call going over Skype and you open another application, it gets minimized and continues to run on the background, right? It does not get disconnected as it used to do in 7.5. And this capability is available to all developers. Now, one thing to note over here is if you are running Skype and you move away from the Skype application, the video will get disconnected. And this is by intent, because you might, unknowingly be doing something which would, then expose you to some embarrassment. So intentionally, the video is going to be disconnected, right? But the audio is going to continue. And if you see here, when the application moves off, it's the same experience as you get on your voice calls. And it's integrated into the environment itself. So if you want to text, you want to call, you get the same experience. Then we have investments in Bluetooth and NFC. I'm planning to do a session probably in January where we will talk about the proximity APIs, where you can have two phones brought near each other and you can transfer content from one phone to the other. Right? And we talk about this capability more in those sessions. So think of it this way, like many people like to go into the deserts, they want to go trekking, and what you would want to do is, if you have an application that you have developed, you want to track that route so that you can share it with friends. So what you could do is, one way would be to upload it to a cloud service, or if there are two friends who are going and only you have it at that point, you can bring both the phones together and it's going to take that information and transfer it to the other friend of yours, and both will have the same route and you can go together. Right? So those are some of the capabilities that you have with the proximity APIs. So we have, as I said, better sharing with NFC. So if you have wallet capability in your applications and you want to pay with the wallet, you can just tap to an NFC-enabled device and information is going to be transferred. We have more networking enhancements, especially for IPv6 support, WinSock support, and incoming sockets on the Windows Phone. This is a significant investment. Now you have, as I said earlier, support for microSD. So you can have applications run from the microSD. You can have your music, your videos on the microSD that you can read from. We also introduced something called the custom store, right? Now, custom contact store, where your application can have its own contacts. And we will integrate this into the People's Hub. So think of it this way. I'm a Facebook application. I have a list of contacts, right? And those are contacts that I would like to have on my phone. So those are my contacts, but they will be integrated into the People Hub also, right? And they can be synchronized with my cloud service as well. But this is different from the People's Contact. So there are two different APIs, right? So if you want to access the People Hub, you have a different API. If you want to create a custom contact hub, then that's a different API. You have file and protocol associations, right? This was there previously also, but it has been enhanced. So now you can register an application with either a protocol or a file type. So for example, if you're building a PDF reader, you can associate it with the .pdf extension. Or if you want to have a custom protocol that you want to use to launch your application, you can do that too. So if you see here, I have created a protocol which my application understands called my protocol, and then I'm providing a URI. So whenever an application launches this URI, my application is going to be invoked, right, with this URI passed to my application. You have in-app purchase, and what that allows you to do is provide, let's say, a default level of experience, and then you can provide additional capabilities that users can purchase. So for example, you are providing a free game, and then you can ask users to buy additional levels as they go along, right? And you can customize this to your liking, however you want to suit your application. There are two types of in-purchase digital content. One is called durables, and the second one is consumables. Durables are usually, one-time purchases and they continue to exist. The consumables are more like rentals. So if you want to buy a movie for a month, or you want to buy an audiobook for a month, or you want to buy a digital book for a month, right? You want to read it and then that expires. So those are the consumables. We also have enterprise application deployment capabilities. So you can build enterprise applications. You can actually build a company hub where you can put all your applications together, and your employees can go to the hub and start downloading the application. So for example, here we have a Contoso application, right? So you have a Contoso application, and this is the company hub. So here we have an application for Microsoft IoT. It lists me all the applications that I have under the hub. It gives me news information that I have headlines for the company, any alerts, my profile. So this is something that you can use to build your own company applications, right? And this is unique to each organization. This is very important for the region because with 7.5 we did not have Arabic support, right? With 8.0 we have complete Arabic support, complete localization. And the way you would do that is you have something called flow direction. You can set it to RTL, and then you have the right to left reading order. But then you may also have certain text within that RTL UI that you want to render left to right. Right? So for example, HTTP addresses or URIs that you want, that make sense in English only. And then you can use a run command to make them run left to right. Okay? When we started with Windows Phone 7.0, we had a very limited reach. We had about 29 countries in which we were offering the applications. And this is the consumer market I'm talking about. When we went to 7.5, we increased that from 29 countries to 63 countries. As of today, we have the local store, like for example, the Saudi store or the Kuwait store or the Bahrain store. We have local stores in 180 plus countries. What that means is you can buy in your local currency. You have locally relevant applications shown on your store. Right? And if you compare that with other platforms, like for example, Android has 31, iOS has 123, we have 180 plus. Right? So we made a significant effort to go into each and every country and have a local experience there. In terms of developer stores, we started with 38 countries. What that meant was that you could submit your applications from those countries only. Now, you can submit your applications from more than 180 countries. So that is 140 more countries available with Windows Phone 8. So you can submit your applications from Saudi as of today with the Windows Phone 8. With Windows 7.5, you had to go through Yala apps and submit your application from there, or go to the States or UK and submit your applications from there. We have support for 50 plus languages, right? And these are the new languages that are there on the Windows Phone 8. We've made significant effort in Windows 8.0 to make it much faster. To that extent, we had to remove the splash screen that you have in your application. So if you see Windows 8 applications, and if you have noticed, there is no splash screen anymore, right? The reason is because the applications load so fast that the splash screen just comes and goes. So it's more of a nuisance and annoyance to the user than showing anything relevant. So we have removed the splash screen out. If you want to have a splash screen for your application, then probably when the application loads, then you can show some UI which depicts the splash screen and then start the application. The way we do that is when you submit your application to the store, you submit it in what we call the CIL, or Common Intermediate Language. This was the Microsoft MSIL that we referred to earlier. So C#, VB.NET are all intermediate languages, right? They are not natively compiled. What we do is, when you submit the application to the store, we natively compile these on the different platforms. So the experience that you get is much better. How many of you have tried this on the .NET platform websites? So you had something similar for websites where you could compile the application and deploy it as a compiled application, right? The same capability is now with the Windows Phone. It gives you a lot of performance. In terms of app capabilities, compatibility, your 7.1 applications or 7.5 applications continue to run on the 8.0 without any changes. You might have some different behaviors, and I'll talk about that in a while. Like, so example, the 7.0 applications require no compilation to run on Windows 8. So if you see on the store today, you will have applications that are 7.5, and they continue to run well, right? And then the new 8.0 applications are native to the runtime. But if you see here something called quirks, right? So Windows 7.5 applications run in quirk mode. What that means is there are some APIs that have changed, and you will have a different behavior in 8.0 if you use the same API. So what we do is we take your 7.0 application and give you the same experience that you would have had in 7.5. Right? Not the 8.0 experience. This slide talks about that in more detail. So you have two scenarios. You have source code incompatibility, and then you have binary code incompatibility. Let me skip a few slides here. So what do you mean by source code incompatibility? You have the Windows Phone 8 OS and the 7.5. In the 8.0, if you are using the storage file exists API, and the file, if a null is passed, it will throw an exception. In the 7.0, it returned a false. So if you are using this API, right, and you're expecting a false to be returned, but an exception is thrown, then your code might, misbehave. So in these scenarios, what we do is we apply the 7.5 behavior and we return a false to you. Okay? And then we have binary incompatibility. What that means is you have a background file transfer task, and we have increased the limit from 5 to 25. But in code, right, if you are still expecting 5 and you have written code that expects 5, and then all of a sudden you have an array of 25s, then your application would break. Okay? And this happens, right? This incompatibility happens when you take a 7.5 code, compile it in 8.0, and without changing the code you have submitted to the store. right? So now you have a 7.5 code which expects the capabilities of 7.5, but now you will be returning values that are 8.0 compatible, right? So you have to keep that in mind. You have all of this documented in the dev center. So if you are having dependencies on any of these APIs, then you need to go and review them and see what needs to be changed. Now, as I mentioned to you, for you to test your application on the device, you need to unlock the device, right? If you're using 7.5 applications, then you will need the Zune software to hook up your device. If you are having 8.0 devices, then you only need a USB connection. You do not need the Zune software. To unlock your device, you need to register as a developer on the Dev Center, and you need to use the phone developer registration GUID or the UI to unlock your devices. If you are a professional developer, you will be able to unlock 3 devices. If you are a student, you will be able to unlock 1 device. Okay? And you can manage these, so you can at any point of time register, unregister the devices, so you're not fixed. But at any point of time, you have up to 3 devices that you can have. From Visual Studio, you can deploy directly to your device, you can test on your device, or you can deploy to the emulator and you can test on the emulator. And we give you the different variations in terms of screen resolution and device capability. So for example, if you see here, we have the 720 resolution, we have the WVGA resolution, and then you have the WSCA resolution. We also give you the 512 MB emulator. So this is a reduced memory footprint. Right? So if you saw the first slide, we said we have 1 GB and 512 devices. So you have devices and applications that you think are going to be used in these devices and may have memory constraints, and you can use this emulator. And this is sort of the default emulator that starts off when you start using Visual Studio. So deploying applications onto the phone, you can deploy up to 10 applications, which we call side loading, right? And you can provide the ZAP file to the to other developers for testing also. But at any point of time, you can have 10 applications that are running on your device which have been side loaded, right? So you can deploy them from Visual Studio, or you can deploy them directly. But at any point of time, you can have 10 applications. Visual Studio has been great at developing applications. This has been one of the strengths of Visual Studio. It's easy to use, it's easy to debug applications, and we bring the same experience to Windows Phone, right? So as I said earlier, you can debug your applications directly on the device. So if you have a phone connected to your PC, and you can deploy your solution to the device, and you can walk through the application in code. You can do that through the emulators too. So you can choose the device that you want. Now, if you want to test your device for performance, right, I would suggest you test it on the device, right, rather than on the emulator, for 2 reasons. Number 1, you do not get native code generation on the emulator. It's only on the device, right? So when you deploy to the device, it gets compiled as native code. Number 2, come again. No, I don't think so. That was the issue. So, as I said, you can compile to native code using the on the device. Secondly, your emulator, even though we restrict it to one core, may be of a better capability than the phone device. So you may get some better performance on the emulator than on the actual device. So when you're testing for performance, test it on the device itself. We run the emulator on the virtual machine, as I said. We also give you what we call the simulation dashboard. So from Visual Studio, we have something called the simulation dashboard, which lets you unlock the screen. So if you, for example, are building a lock screen application and you want to test that, you can lock your screen and you can unlock your screen. You can also look at the network performance. So if I come back a few slides, okay, we'll come to that. So on the emulator, what you can do is you can test for network performance, and what that allows you to do is you can say I want a 2G network, I want a 3G network, and you can see how the performance of your application is on the network. All right? We already covered this. In terms of the emulator interface, we provide you a keyboard that you can use page up, page down to hide the keyboard. When you're designing your applications, keep in mind that the UI you design should not be hidden by the keyboard, because I've seen many applications, right? When you try to write using the onboard keyboard, it actually hides the UI. So you don't know exactly what you're typing and where you're typing and what's going on. Especially when you're using the device itself, it becomes very difficult. So keep the layout in mind. On the emulator, you can remove the keyboard by pressing the page up, page down keys. You have different orientations that you can change on the emulator. So you can have portrait or landscape, and you can test your application how it behaves in terms of UI on the emulator. We have something called the camera emulation. So you cannot capture images directly using your webcam on the emulator, but what we give you is this kind of running box. So when you click it, it gives you the snapshot as rendered on the screen. So I'll come back to this. We also provide you location emulation. What that means is, if I click on the additional tools, I have a location option which gives me the complete map. So when the map loads up, it defaults to Redmond. But then you can click anywhere on the screen and you can move the location to that region. Also, you can add push pins to the map, and it's going to record those push pins as you add them. And then you can take that data and you can replay it again on the emulator to sort of emulate a movement of your phone from location to location. Right? So you don't have to take the phone and run around everywhere. You can sit at your desktop and you can test your application. As I mentioned, we have the emulator, which can, the simulation dashboard that can emulate the lock and unlock of the lock screen. It also gives you a network simulation, so you can check your network speed, whether you're on 2G, 3G, Wi-Fi, or you don't have network capabilities. So for example, I have seen applications developed which run very nicely when there is network. The moment network is not there, you lose Wi-Fi connectivity or 3G connectivity, the application starts crashing. Right? So this is a good way for you to test your applications, how they behave when the network is lost, and how they behave on a low frequency network also. We allow you capabilities to capture screenshots, and this is a good way for documentation and providing snapshots for the dev center, because when you submit your application to the dev center, they want certain images that you provide for your application, and this is a good way to capture those images. What we've added with 8.0 is capability to capture your screen as is on the device itself. And the way you would do that is you click on the power button along with the home button simultaneously. And it's going to take a screenshot capture and save it to your Photos library. So let me go back to the demos. For example, I have an application. I can say take picture. Right? Now this is simulating the camera capture. So if I click on it, right, it gives me the screen as it was, and then I can either say accept or I can retake the picture. I can accept it, and it gives me the picture. So this allows you to sort of, simulate the capture capabilities within the emulator itself and test your application if your application is working fine. So as I told you, we have the additional tools, and then I have the accelerometer, I have the location, screenshots, and the network, right? So if I go back to the location, I can say track location. I don't have internet connectivity, so it's not showing me the maps. But what I could do is, I could load an XML file. If you see here, it brings me the coordinates, right? And I can play this back and sort of emulate a movement of the phone in the application, as if the phone is being moved. So I can play this back, or I can even add push pins and track that in my phone, right? So I could add push pins and I can sort of simulate the movement of the application on the map. So what we saw was, we go back to the slides. So what we saw was the new capabilities of the Windows Phone 8. We saw the different templates that were available in Visual Studio that allowed us to develop not only XAML, C# VB kind of applications, but we can use XNA, we can use Direct 3D, we can use C++ to create runtime components that we can leverage in our XAML and VB applications also. We saw the new hardware capabilities for Windows Phone 8, the new improvements in the APIs, the capabilities that have been added for developers in terms of VoIP, NFC, etc. And also the tools that have been provided in Visual Studio to help you build and debug those applications. So I'll open the floor for any questions before we break for a short recess, and then we'll come back in about, say, 10 minutes. So any questions? No questions? Yes?
This is my application, the welcome, should I make an advice? Should I be a developer or just a developer?
So the question is, if I am a developer and I want to test my application on a device, do I need to register as a developer account, right? Okay, yes. So you cannot unlock your device unless and until you register as a developer account, because when you try to unlock the device, it's going to ask you for that developer account. And you can have only 3 devices that you have unlocked with that developer account. Okay, so if you are a professional developer, you get 3 devices. If you are a student, you get 1 device.
Why?
What do you mean why?
Why do you have to work only with 1 or 3 devices?
If we do not want side-loaded applications, right? We do not want people to load devices because it breaks the whole investment Microsoft has done in the certification process, in the security, ensuring that devices are secure and performant. So it goes against the whole principle of that ecosystem that has been built, right? So 3 devices is good enough for a developer to, I don't think so people would buy more than those to test. So having tested on 3 different devices is good enough for testing your applications, right? If you are a student, then you get 1 device because this is a free account that Microsoft is providing you. So, I hope that answers your question. Yes? Sir, I'll come back to you. Yes. So each subscriber gets 1 token to register himself to the developer center, right? With that account, you can unlock 3 phones. Clear? So you get a code or a token for the Windows Phone store, and you get a token for the Windows 8 store. So MSDN subscription provides a lot of benefits. It gives you access to Windows Azure hosting for no cost. It gives you access to the Windows Store, and it gives you access to the Windows Phone Dev Center also. Yes? Okay. So if I understand your question correctly, you want to build an application? Right.
Or maybe I want to deploy to the store, but I want to restrict people who can download this application just for some.
Yes. So the company store that you see is available only to the company employees. So the question was, I want to build an application for my enterprise, and I want only my company employees to have access to that application. And with the company store or company hub that I showed you, only company employees are able to access that application. So if you go into the settings, there is something called company account. And you need to provide your domain user ID password that goes and authenticates against your credentials, validates you, and then provides you access to that hub.
You have to pay more as a developer.
There are different mechanics. We will talk about that later when we do the enterprise story, right? Yes? I'm not sure about the developers, the test capabilities that are there with. So there are 2 ways for you to test your applications, right? One is through the dev center itself, right? So we had that capability earlier where you could invite users. So you deploy your application and you invite users to test your application. And those users could then deploy from the store and test your application.
They should have their own devices unlocked.
You don't need to have an unlocked device for that, right? So that's one scenario. You download the application from the store to test. So they get a email asking them. So it's not published to the store, but it's sort of in beta and they can test the applications. The second scenario is you take your application compiled, ZAP file, and you give it to your friend on a USB or micro SD, and he side loads that application for testing, right? So you can have, each developer can have up to 10 applications that he can install onto the machine. Get me?
Irrespective of unlocking the phone.
So you have 3 phones that you can unlock, and each phone can have up to 10 applications. If you want to add more, you have to uninstall an application and add more applications, right? Any other questions? Yes?
I have 2 questions. I don't know if I lost the first one. Is the emulator connected to the internet through the PC?
Come again?
The emulator.
Yes.
Is it connected to the internet through the PC?
Yes, it is connected to the, you have the option. It's going to ask you if you want to connect the emulator to the internet, and it then connects it through the PC.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are there any faults, any ways, to transfer an application from Android, an existing application from Android to Windows 8 somehow? Even the GUI, I don't know, the XML transition to Windows 1, do you understand my question?
I understand. So I am not aware of any tool that converts an Android or an iOS application to the Windows Phone 8. There might be, I'm not aware of those. Okay? Because keep in mind that if, let's say, if you want to take a Windows Phone application to the Android marketplace, it's a different code base, it's different user interface, different design principles, and we'll talk about that when you come to the design session. It's a completely different design experience. So I do not think it's that simple just to take an application and then just migrate it. There are code generators that use HTML5 to build phone applications, but then that's a different experience altogether.
But not for migration. Something to build a library to use and use it in all three devices.
Yeah, that's different. So that's the code behind, right? No, here we are taking an existing application and migrating it to the Windows Phone. Yeah. So I said I'm not aware of anything that exists like that. Any other questions? Okay. So let's break for a short while. Let's say we come back.